So anyway, her day turned into dilemma. So yeah, you can. Oh, that'd be good. You can take this money. That's for me.
Okay, at least just see what I got here.
See what it looks like.
It's an amazing tripod. It's a whole universe.
Oh, there you go. Boom. Boom.
So
Where did we leave off the other day? I gave you snippets of stuff.
I've been at the 6th floor all day.
Yeah.
Making utilizing their Dallas Morning News.
Oh, do they have archives?
Mm-hmm. If you use their password.
Well, is it like micro? How do they do it? What's the medium? Is it
It's digitized.
digitized?
DMN is.
Didn't know they had that there.
Have you never used the research room at the 6th floor? Not a lot of people have. You can just.
I would like to at some point. That's why I guess I'm asking how you go about it.
Oh well, Krishna. She's the research room lady.
Yeah.
You can reach her at krishnashinoy@jfk.org, or you can just request on their website, jfk.org. It's kind of like setting up just a time. It's kind of a formal process.
Right, yeah.
Because Krishna's, she's really OCD. She wants to make sure she's pulled out a bunch of sources for you, and when you walk in, they're going to be like right there. And she's like, do you have any questions on how to utilize the DMN archives? And she's a real go-getter. I love her. Her birthday's coming up too, so she likes pie.
Be nice to her. Take her cupcake.
Oh, I always.
So how far back is there archives on the Dallas Morning News?
Well, DMN goes back to 1885.
So they have access to all those years back. I gotcha.
I mean, you can do that at the library too.
Well, I kind of thought, I just didn't know. Never ventured into that world yet.
I like the ambiance of the 6th floor. They don't focus just on Kennedy. They focus a lot on local history.
Yeah.
1960s stuff, obviously. Civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of LBJ stuff.
Gotcha. So interesting.
Yeah.
They should have a whole covey of information back in the 80s when they were creating the 6th floor.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was focusing on. So I listened to some of their oral histories, and I have Robert Deckard.
Yeah.
I listened to his. I listened to Linda Lynn Adams.
Oh, really?
And she talked.
Conover Hunt?
She talked, because her and Conover.
Or the moving forces behind it.
And then I listened to some of Adeline Harrison.
Oh.
I was listening to Charles Briggs, a CIA agent from the very early days of the CIA, but I don't know why I listened to that one because it didn't have much to do with it.
No, his name didn't really come across, but there's just a lot of. It was an interesting time because they were trying to create that museum, and we were trying to establish the alignment through downtown. It was going to be a tunnel. We probably got all that.
Yeah.
But then it became a surface running alignment, and it was the skirt around the back end of the Kennedy assassination site, i.e. the parking lot behind the fence. And there was a lot of consternation as they were making their overture to I guess it was the Department of the Interior to create, a historic site, that we were going to be impacting, I'll use that word, impacting the site, because we were going to have catenary wires running across the triple underpass bridge, and that would be a different condition that existed in '62.
Yeah, I have in quotes, it was an emotional debate.
That it was. Yes, it was.
And Adeline Harrison, I was just writing down verbatim what she was saying in her oral history. One of the things I wrote down, she said, well, I also wonder if it was an issue of some of the men who didn't want the subways downtown.
Yeah.
They tried to disrupt everything we did. It was difficult. I can't even remember some of the big issues and the fights that lasted till 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, easily 11 o'clock, yeah. Yeah, no, there's a lot of politics that went with it.
Oh, she said some big business people didn't want the subways underground.
That's correct. That is correct. There's a lot of big business that just didn't want DART it was just too much of a change. They should bring those people downtown, or those people.
Yeah. And there's, I was looking at the database, and on August 9th, 1983, it was talking about
August 1983?
August 9th, 1983, right before the August
Yeah.
13th vote.
Yeah.
It talked about some of the DART opponents are fighting a guerrilla war with many separate neighborhood-based committees striking at the highly organized establishment-backed DART campaign. There's a thing called Down with DART.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Was that like just a group that didn't want DART?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There were a bunch of those. Yeah.
And SMART.
SMART was kind of the alt-right at the time that was just, it was a coalition of Archer Republicans with, coalesced with a guy named, there was Bill Severa, who was a state representative. He's kind of the Tea Party. I saw he had a letter to the editor a couple of weeks ago, which was kind of an I told you so letter. County Judge Dave Fox, who was a home builder, Fox and Jacobs Homes, if you've ever heard of those. They were bought by somebody, but he was an early home builder in Dallas, Dave Fox, and he was not a proponent of DART whatsoever. So they formed this group called SMART.
Him and Dave Fox?
Those two, Bill Cervera, Dave Fox.
How do you spell Severa?
With a C, C-E-R-V-E-R-H-A, something like that.
Okay.
And they were all of the SMART campaign. And I can't remember what it stood for. There's one there too, but that was Irving.
It says
Sensible.
Save Mobility, Advance Responsibility, Transportation. It's like
Yeah.
silly. Lucius Wagner. Oh, that's what Down with DART.
Yeah.
Probably not the true
Yeah.
pronunciation.
Can't remember his name, but I'm not saying it's, I just can't remember.
But it seemed like in that article there was a guy named Fred Curry who was kind of going
Fred Curry.
against what they were saying.
Fred Curry was on the interim DART board, and he was a real kind of go-getter. He rode the bus all the time. He was the CEO of Greyhound at the time. And actually, here he is, right here. These are like the original board members. Let me see if I can find Fred Curry here. Well, this must be the second board. Fred was on the interim board.
That guy looks funny.
J.B. Jackson?
He looks like he's got something on his mind.
J.B. always has something on his mind. J.B. Jackson was probably the foremost black activist in Dallas.
What's his name?
J.B. Jackson. Have you read The Accommodation?
Is that what's his face for the
Jim Schute's book?
Yeah, I haven't, but I hear good things.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating study. It's an older book, but it has to do with property takes around Fair Park and anyway, JB goes back to the MLK Southern Conference. Southern.
Snick.
Hmm?
Snick.
No, it's Southern Christian Leadership Council, but it was the back group with MLK's group, and whenever they were doing all the marches, and JB was associated with it, and anyway, he was quite the activist in the interim plan. So when the interim plan came out to be voted on by the public, JB was the only opposing vote because he felt that there wasn't enough for southern sector. And can you get a shot? We can fish it out of there if need be.
Oh no, it's okay. I was just trying not to get the glare or the
Yeah,
shadow.
That's
Not the best photographer or anything, but.
So yeah, JB was quite.
Is that Adeline?
Yeah.
Harrison, or is that her name? I'm learning all the
it's-
people.
Yeah, Adeline.
Adeline. And she was the first mayor, female mayor
She was.
of Dallas.
She was. Yeah, she was. She ascended to be the mayor of Dallas.
She's got that mayor haircut.
Oh yeah, she's stronger than a garlic malt. And she was a very interesting lady because she was put into that role. She had been a community activist, fighting for women's rights, and she was Jewish, so Jewish rights, or anybody who was really oppressed, the non-business community. And but she got on city council and was very active, and she was mayor pro tem. I think she's on planning commission also, and then got on the council. And then when she was elected, she became a very strong advocate and became very political. When she was interim mayor, and then I don't know if she ran. Wes White was the mayor. He resigned to run for Congress. She ascended to that rank, and then I don't know what happened after that. I don't think she ran for mayor, but then she was appointed to the interim DART board, which was from 1982 to 1980, really 84, and they were the ones who shaped the service plan, and that was taken to the voters in 1983. And so this was kind of the I don't want to say propaganda. Yeah, propaganda. This is what the information that was put out by the campaign, by the pro-DART campaign. And it was pretty, here's a picture of it. And these were, questions, frequently asked questions about DART.
Oh, is that the one that's put on? I read an article that was published on August 12th, the day before the thing, and it had frequently asked questions, so I was getting like an idea of what
It's probably the opposing view that they came out right before to influence the election. Let's see when this was.
It seemed fairly objective, only in the fact that, and it was interesting because it said, when's your estimated time of completion, and
Yeah.
it said 2010, which,
Mm-hmm.
too bad of a guess for 1983.
Well, we did a lot of ramp up for it. I'll show you what we took to the public. But I mean, that was kind of the flyer that was, for general consumption, put it that way. But this notebook is really the plan itself that we took to the public, and there was two elements to the plan. The first one was a rail plan, and the second was a bus plan. So the rail plan, or let's see what this one is. This is the bus plan that we had for the public. So we would, if you were to go to a public meeting in the summer of '83, you would see that plan on one foam core board, and then the other part of it would be this rail plan. So these are the two that you would have seen in front of you, side by side. And what it would do is it would, I'm trying to find something here, that's what I need. So again, this was taken to everybody throughout the whole service area. There was a host of all these cities that ultimately, we had a good number that voted in, but the ones there were some that didn't vote in. For example, those are all the ones that voted in and out. So this is like the newspaper from the next day. And you can see there were some that were
Oh, David Bowie.
sounds fun.
Try not to get sidetracked there.
You were sidetracked. Who is it? Oh. So, again, the plan was all encompassing and was taken to all those cities for a vote, and it passed in some and it did not pass in others. And then this plan was resized accordingly so that, like, Duncanville did not vote in. So the line that would have gone all the way down to Duncanville and all the bus service that was down in Duncanville would have been removed from the plan. Same with Mesquite, same with Grand Prairie, all those. So we ended up with the cities that we did, and then Buckingham. There's two on there that probably don't come to mind. Buckingham was up here in the Richardson area, and they were annexed into Richardson, so that,
Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, it became like a moot point. It was a tiny little community, but and the other was Cockrell Hill, which you know where that is, and they didn't vote. They did not vote in August, but they did in a subsequent election.
Gosh, these shadows are terrible.
Yeah, there's a light. It's not real great in here. It's by design.
Yeah, I guess Rowlett wasn't even on the map.
It was barely.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, barely. There weren't very many people out there in 1983. Actually, our whole city hall was about as big as this office, if I remember correctly. It was tiny.
I'm aware.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents bought a house
Out
there when I was 2 months old, so
Yeah.
grew up on that side of town. I remember it was a pretty big deal when we got a McDonald's.
Yeah, yeah. And again, in the scheme of things, the way this is, that all the cities, because it's a regional authority, so we really didn't have to have an election by municipal boundaries. We could have done precincts. Oh, excuse me. Something's tickling me. They were a great benefactor from being in the pool with everybody else, because they're just the amount that they contributed every year up to this point, sales tax wise, would not have really warranted rail in a rail investment in their community. But since we were extending the line out Garland, it was only like another, I think it's like 3 miles to get into where it is now. So we continued, and that was part of what made it, synergistically a more dynamic. And now they've had a lot of development in the downtown Rowlett, and they want to continue an extension from wherever Rowlett ends out here, where the heck out here, kind of out across the lake. Yeah, that's Rowlett. Wherever they have this new development out here. So, because I think it goes out here now to wherever it is, wherever it goes out that way. So these are the two elements that we're taking to the public. And that's what you said on here, is that in this key it says these will be developed in this time frame. Phase 1, phase 2. I think the last is 2010, out to 2010. That it would be, all this would have been completed by the year 2010. And actually we came pretty close to that. We had a lot of fits and starts at the front end, from 83 through really to like almost 1990. We tried one thing. There was a vote in 1988 where it failed. We were going after a long-term debt to build, the subway and everything else, and that election failed. We had to go back to the drawing board and kind of tweak things. That's when we got HOV lanes included. But then there was just a lot of doubt that was brought forward, saying, well, do we really, what do we really want? So we went forward with a plan called New Directions, and that kind of recast things. We still held on to all the corridors that we had, and again, a lot of the bus service that was to be put in place that was already out there. That was one of the things we did early on, was put a lot of the bus service out, which was a good thing and a bad thing, because we ramped up a lot of service in the city of Dallas where it had already existed. There was an older system that the city owned called Dallas Transit System, and that was kind of dying on the vine at the city. And it served really the city of Dallas and into the city of Garland, because Garland had really good ridership, but that's the only place that really served. So when the election occurred, we started ordering new buses and getting the service increased in the city of Dallas, and then we started a network in the suburbs. And we really started with park and ride lots in the suburbs, which was a really good idea. So we would create, we'd rent or buy a big lot, and we'd put like aggregate stones down and start buses right away, it was okay unless it rained or got really dry for a long period. It was dusty or it got muddy. But anyway, but we had really good ridership on that. But what did not work was the local service out in the suburbs, because it takes a long time to develop a bus ridership. People move to an area where there's a bus route, and then they fit their lifestyle accordingly. So if you put something out there, then you have to depend on, okay, is it hitting the right targets, shopping centers, hospitals, and things like that. So it took a while for that to develop. So we had these big yellow buses rumbling around in the suburbs that were blocking a lane of traffic with nobody on them. And so this pushback started, like, well, man, nobody's riding these buses, I'm paying for them, nobody's riding it. And the benchmark all through all these years since 1983 on was, when am I going to get rail? That was the mark of success. So all those factors started to go into those early years. The one thing we did do, whenever, first thing we did as an entity was we lowered the fare in the city of Dallas from, I think it was like 75 cents to 50 cents. Kept that for a number of years so we could continue a commitment to those who needed to use the system, but also kind of a tool, marketing tool to increase our ridership. So those things would go on the bus side. It took some fits and starts on the rail side, and then we finally determined, okay, rather than because the initial vote, we were going to put a subway through the downtown. I think that's what really got your interest at the outset, and that would have required long-term debt. And to do that, we went to the voters in '88, and in '88 it failed. So we went back to the drawing board, and out of that came a kind of a revamped system where we were looking at what is now the technology lightrail, which means we could operate at grade, and it wasn't, you didn't have to preclude cars or pedestrians from crossing the rail line at the appropriate spots because the power source is 14 feet overhead, as opposed to a sub, or they call it heavy rail. It's a terminology like Atlanta and BART and Washington D.C. and New York have heavy rail. The only difference is the cars weigh the same. The only differential is the power source. So in all those ones I just mentioned, the power source is a third rail, which is between the two rails that the wheels turn on. And what that means with the power source down there, you can't touch it, you can't walk on it, cars can't drive over it. Light rail, when it's a catenary overhead, you get that ability, that flexibility of cars going over it, pedestrians. So you don't have to grade separate it, which was a huge consideration for us. And light rail that technology had been increasing the prior 10 or 15 years before 1983. It was still relatively new, but it was showing much more flexibility. There's more European systems that were using it, and you could get essentially more bang for your buck. So the board decided to go that direction, and that was a key decision because we, at that stage, said, no, we're not going to dig a subway through the downtown. We're going to go at grade, which is on the existing rail, the corridor that's out there now. Still, what wasn't determined was between, as shown on the map, where am I? See how it's a crossed hatch right here? Which is, if you look here, it says undesignated. Is that what it says? Undesignated. Yeah, undesignated. So we didn't know how we were going to get from downtown up Central through here. And the reason was simply, we knew at Mockingbird North, we own the corridor that goes from Mockingbird all the way up. In fact, we own it all the way up here to like Sherman-Denison. But at this point, we didn't know how to get from here to here, even though what is now the Santa Fe Trail was available, and it had been abandoned by the freight railroad, and we were entertaining that. But the cities like of Highland Park said, no, we don't want you to go on that. And they had a resolution that said, no, you're not going to go on that. Don't even think about it. So that point from really Central Expressway south right up to where Goat Hill is. You know where Goat Hill is? It's that little outcropping right there behind Victory of rock, kind of where the Katy Trail comes down, crosses Harry Hines, and then
It's like where the
Yeah.
Coors Light can
yeah,
thing.
exactly, that one. That's Goat Hill. So we own from really kind of at the base of that into Victory. I'll get back to that because that's important for what we're going to build next. But we didn't want to fight the battle of going from Goat Hill up to Mockingbird because the Park Cities would have cratered it. And so we started looking at how do we get from downtown up here, and ultimately that became a tunnel. And why it became a tunnel is because TxDOT was, at the time, was was boring a tunnel that went down Central Expressway, and in fact it's still there. Well, that was a drainage system for all this water and outfall that was coming this direction from both sides and kind of collecting along this corridor and draining down to the Trinity. And before you were around, if you were to drive on Central, it was real hilly up and down, and a lot of the areas wouldn't drain. I mean, there'd be standing water, so if there was a real heavy rain, there would be problems associated with it. So they knew they needed to do something. There's more and more concrete being built in this corridor. So TxDOT decided, probably with the city, but they bored a 20-foot diameter tunnel, big old thing, that was a drainage tunnel for all this water coming down. And it goes down to about where Cole Park is, over off to the west side there, kind of a little bit south of City Place. And underneath there's this huge tunnel that goes straight down. So it's like a reservoir. And that's one of those unknown things of Dallas, that there's this big old catchment area that holds water for real heavy rains, and I don't know how much it holds, zillions of gallons I'm sure. And then what it does is it holds it so it doesn't flood, and then it pumps it out down to the Trinity later on. So we knew what the geology was once you do the tunnel, and that's the big unknown when you're projecting costs on these projects of what's the geology, how hard is it to get through, and how easy is it to build a tunnel. When somebody's already done that, you have all these costs already identified. So we kind of went back to our board and others and said, hey, we now know we can dig this tunnel from Mockingbird down to really Woodall Rogers and do it for this amount of money and control our destiny. I think I was telling you, up to that point, Central was being revisited. Once that tunnel was done, that they were going to rebuild Central to what it is right now. They're widening it and cantilevering these lanes and all this other good stuff. But one of the considerations that was being entertained was that allow TxDOT to build two boxes. So under each service road, the service road would have been the top of the box, and there'd be this 25-foot square box under each service road, and a train northbound would be on the east side and southbound would be on the west side. And that would be the system to get us from downtown up to Mockingbird. So you'd have these two trains that right now at City Place you can just go across a platform to get to. If they're up here, you'd have to get off the train and cross over Central and go to the other if you wanted to, for whatever reason. If you caught the wrong train from downtown, you wanted to get off and turn around, you'd get off and walk all the way across and get down. It wasn't really effective operationally. But this way, with a tunnel, we controlled that. We said, oh no, now we can put them side by side in a tunnel. So that's how that all played out. And I think I described to you down here at Freedman Cemetery, when TxDOT was excavating all that, they ran into a number of unmarked graves. So they had to identify and excavate all those graves, then reinter them into what is now Freedman Cemetery that was created. And that was a big delay for that project because they had to do it correctly, which they did. But they had to identify, I think I always use the range of, they expected 100 or so bodies, and there's 1,200 or something. There was a considerable number.
So, but they were expecting to run into it though.
They just didn't know, had no clue as to, because there were cemeteries that were already there that were really for the citizens, but these were these were probably unmarked because they were poverty sites or black communities that they just said, well, there's where the railroad existed at that time, which is where Central is. It was a railroad line. And so they just said, well, this is our area, just kind of, this is an extension, if you will, of the cemetery or the space beyond the cemetery. So it was ill-defined, and they went in and identified it and then created what is now that Freedman Cemetery out of that. But we were already excavating our tunnel, and we weren't caught up in that whole dilemma.
But the TxDOT spent put their project behind about a year.
It was probably 12 or 14 months, because they had, if I remember correctly, had 3 archaeological teams out on site working there. So there's a lot of history there, reporting that went with it. It's a fascinating story. That my numbers may not be accurate to the degree, but that's the backstory of what was taking place at that time as part of the considerations of what we were trying to accomplish.
You know what year that would have been? 88?
It was probably somewhere between 88 or 89-ish. And yeah. Now there's underneath of you there is, see that D magazine, that thing on the top? I'll try to get a copy of that. It's a pretty good, it gives you, it's under the glass. That one, I have a copy here someplace. It's from 88 or 86. It's from June of 1986. And it's an interesting take of what was going on, the dilemmas of dart, and it kind of tells the rest of the story of who all the players were in the dartboard, what we were up against, what were some of the issues, how badly staff was getting beaten up, etc.
Oh, like really?
Yeah.
Beaten up?
Oh yeah, we were brutal. It was brutal. It was a really tough time to work here because we weren't doing anything right, and everybody wanted the blame game.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, I think I have it already copied. I'll send you. I think I'll get a copy here because that's interesting. We put things in context. But all that preceded the vote in '88, which we were going forward to. It failed. What are we going to do, said everybody. So we went back to the drawing board. In about a year, we came up with a new plan that essentially created everything in a light rail mode. And then we embarked on the tunnel underneath Central and building the downtown. And that's about concurrent whenever Conover, Hunt, and Linda Lynn Adams and all were trying to create the 6th floor. So we had this collision of activities not all working in the same direction at the West End, which was hopping at the time. So there's a lot of activity. Everybody wanted it to be done right. They wanted their museum. We just wanted to get the rail going because it's a critical link right there. And anyway, we sorted it all out, but it took some doing.
Yeah, there was they didn't know if they wanted to mess with the Pacific Avenue or Elm Street.
Oh yeah,
decision.
now Pacific versus Elm was a lengthy study leading up to that vote in '88. And we probably spent maybe 2.5 years evaluating whether to go below Pacific or Elm in a tunnel. And there was all sorts of dilemmas because you have to exit the tunnel to get back on that right-of-way that's over the triple underpass. I remember one scenario was essentially you have to exit a tunnel someplace. And it's and whenever you come out of the ground, it's like Mockingbird Station. It's a portal. So you come out and you transition out. So you're going from 40 feet up to ground level, and you transition. It's open air with concrete walls, and that's a difficult piece of infrastructure to put into an urban context. Where do you put something like that? Because it's basically it's just real hard to put into that. There's not a lot of things you can do with it, build around it. You can build over it, come out of a building, but it's just, it has a lot to do. So, like in the West End, with the Elm Street alignment, we're looking at Pacific and Elm. Well, Elm Street comes right out in the middle of the Kennedy, the Dealey Plaza. So you have this portal, where you put this portal as it's coming out of the ground and getting up to that railroad that's existing, that right-of-way area. It would go right through the middle of that. At that time, they're trying, number one, they're trying to create a museum there. But even trying to create the museum was very controversial. They had big battles because the old guard of Dallas was saying, "Why we want to forget that. There's nothing to be proud of with this assassination site." So it was an open wound for them. They didn't really want the museum. They were battling to get it. We were trying to put an alignment through there and not really piss everybody off. So ultimately, we look at Pacific. Pacific was a little bit better because it kind of skirts, the Dealey Plaza. And I can't remember how all it emptied out, but it was less intrusive. But all that work went on, and we were just getting ready to go to a vote, and that failed. And so we had to go back to the drawing board, and all that kind of went.
And they said the Pacific route was a little more pricey, right?
It probably was. And again, we kept discovering things. Once you get underground, you don't know what you're going to run into. Foundations of buildings or parking garages that are underneath the right-of-way. Because we have to, our goal is to stay in the public right-of-way with a tunnel. That way we don't have to buy property from adjacent property owners. Even if it's 30 feet below ground, you have to buy that. So we try to stay in the public rights-of-way and minimize property takes that we have to get. But the Pacific versus Elm, and remember there used to be a horror movie called The Nightmare on Elm Street, and we used to have those posters around, like Freddy Krueger and the Nightmare on Elm Street, because we spent so much time and money and effort trying to get to that point, only to see it fail at a vote. So then it was back to the drawing board. And at the time, I'll tell you, we even had the people like Dave, the SMART group, Dave Fox and Bill Severa were going, "See, we told you, nobody wants this." And they're trying to push our head underwater because Houston was going a different route. They were going with just buses, a really heavy bus involvement in HOV lanes, and using buses to do everything because they thought that was the better route. And in fact, part of that was building more highway capacity to put buses on, which everybody liked highways. So there was a real big push against rail to get it in place. And that's really what we had to overcome. But ironically, Houston has probably, 14 miles of rail or something, as opposed to what we have. So we feel like we have a better infrastructure to build on, better basis to build upon. But we kind of made sense of all this. If you take off a lot of these areas, like Mesquite, we didn't go there, in Duncanville and Grand Prairie. So it really, Flower Mound was in and they voted out. Capel was in, they voted out. It was much too early for them. It really, really was. But the rest of the stuff we pretty much put in place. So I say that, because we made a commitment to build things, and pretty much that's what we've done, and pretty much almost in the same time frame as we said we were going to do it. But that gets us to where we are now. And where are we now? Well, we've built this. Now what are we going to do next? And should we involve other cities who are outside the service area? How do you do that? Because they're coming in town anyway. Or, just how do we want to do things in the future? So, it's kind of a hard issue. But anyway, you're focusing in on those early.
Yeah, I'm like, there's interesting questions popping up in my head, but I'm like, but if I get too deep in that,
you could go forever.
because
Let's see what they had. Yeah, we can tell how many. Is that me or you? Let's see here.
You had mentioned on the telephone, this interesting term that I wrote down, foamers.
Yeah, foamers.
To go into
What foamers are?
Yeah, or where the etymology of the word.
It's kind of a given in the railroad, railroad world that they are extreme enthusiasts of railroads, all things that are on rail. and they'll go out and take pictures of like specific rail cars or engines or unique stuff and follow it. So you'll see it. Well, there are those on like on Facebook even now. They'll be going. I saw engine number 4230 today over in Little Rock. Pulling this in a direction. So they're just tied kind of to extremes. Or even like in McKinney Avenue, Phil Cobb, who started it, he would probably call himself a foamer because they're just extreme enthusiasts who love rails so much they do whatever it takes to get it in a higher platform or even built, like McKinney Avenue. I mean, Phil single-handedly, you got equipment, old rail cars, and negotiate with the city to use the McKinney Avenue, and the rails were already in McKinney. They had to upgrade some, but by and large, the rails were in place so that they could get it implemented relatively quickly. And it was a complete volunteer organization, still is, where they have volunteers who work on the cars and operate the cars. Now, it's great, and it really is, but there's more and more people using it every day, and a number of whom are living uptown, and they use it to get down lower McKinney or into downtown Arts District and like. So ultimately, it's not ADA compliant. So if you have mobility issues, you can't really get onto it because it's a big step up. I don't know if they're air conditioned or not. They're not modernized, so there may be. In the future, as we try to develop in conjunction with the city a network of streetcars as a distribution mechanism, there may be. What we're trying to do next is connect the Oak Cliff streetcar that ends pretty much at Union Station, kind of extend that through downtown to match up to where the McKinney Avenue now comes down to Pearl Street in that area and loops around. So make that connection, and then that section that McKinney operates. Ultimately, we'd probably upgrade that where we would run modern equipment on it that was ADA compliant, user friendly, and then have the rolling collection, as we call it, the older equipment on weekends, special occasions, and the like. And may possibly extend that up to Knox Henderson is also another goal. Now that's out there. It's not imminent, the extension, because we got to build it through the downtown first. But that's kind of the game plan. Then allowing for expansions to the east or to the west. You got to cross a bridge to go over, like the West Dallas, or underneath 345. If it's existing above grade or goes below grade or whatever happens to it, we got to get across it. See, that's another issue with D2. The other portal where it comes out of the ground is in Deep Ellum End, and we have to consider 345. And it's going to stay up here, or it's going to be at ground level, or it's going to be below ground. Where we come out of the ground, remember you're coming out of the ground, and you have to kind of dodge it so that we get back up to ground and not interfere with whatever happens with 345. So we've taken that into consideration on D2, and we do that with all the other streetcar planning where you allow for extensions that you'll build a system, but you have either turnouts or where you can point in a direction where in the future you can tie into it without tearing up the track that you're operating on. That's important, and that's the infamous Knox Henderson station scenario. And I think we talked about that, right? Where we over excavated at Knox Henderson, so there's a cavern there that could be a station in the future. Could be.
Do you see that happening?
In my lifetime?
In general.
No, it would cost so much money, and I say so much money because you think about Knox Henderson. It's on the west side of Central, so it's over on the Knox Henderson side, which is the big dollar side of town, and so you'd probably have to buy like the mattress store or something like that that's right there in that vicinity. There'd be a ton of construction that would go as you drilled down and took out all the rock and soil to get down to about 60 or it's almost 8. How far is it? Is it 80 feet down or 120 feet down? I can't remember at City Place. So let's say it's like 60 or 80 feet at there, Knox Henderson, because it's coming up toward Mockingbird. But still, you got to take all that out. You got to take it away. Then you got to build a station down into it to get to it. So you'd have to have exuberant support from the area right around there to do that. And again, when we were building the tunnel, nobody wanted it. There was no support. In fact, we had identified it as a potential station, and the Greenland Hills folks on the east side of Central said, no, don't want it. You're unproven dirt, which is fair. And then Knox Henderson, there's no support. So all we did is over excavated to create an area, a work area, so that if there was ever to be one, we wouldn't have to stop operating of the trains in the middle of the night to allow for that construction. You could fit equipment in there and start, but then again, you'd have to go up with all the soil and stuff, so which meant the reverse. You'd have to dig down, but you'd still have a work area that you would not interrupt operations. So that'd be a lot of money.
Seems like an uphill battle to get a consensus on DART in general.
Oh yeah,
I guess that's always been.
that's been the case.
Do you think it'll ever change, or it's getting more?
I think
normal
I think people. It's not that people really hate us. We're just easy to pick on because we're everywhere every day. I mean, we run 700 buses out there every day, 120 trains. I don't know how many paratransit vehicles. So we're everywhere, over 700 square miles. So it's really easy to say, well, that driver cut me off, or just pick an issue. But there's so many rolling stock out there every day that we're everywhere, and we take a sales tax. We take sales tax money. So
is it still 1%?
yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're taking your money, and there's an expectation of you to get a level of service and that varies with, everybody has their own belief of how things should be run and operated and secured. But I'll put it this way, it would be extremely hard to get an agency started if we were to do it right now. And I think that's why you see Austin suffering greatly. San Antonio is a bus-only system. And ultimately, buses are really flexible, meaning you can change the route.
When you say it'd be hard to start this up right now, you're talking about light rail and buses?
Yeah,
or
an
just
agency.
like
If to start an
the
agency
entire-
now would be really extremely difficult. We just caught a very opportune moment with the right sort of leadership at the right time, because Dallas was just starting to get really congested. LBJ was showing us the future of being, there's just a lot of people here, and how's this all going to work?
Do you think that Robert Deckard was a pretty big proponent for supporting the plan?
I don't know if I'd use the description of very big. He was supportive.
Yeah, I'm kind of slowly familiarizing myself with some of these players.
That's guarded. He was guarded, I think, in his opinion. He knew it was probably a good thing, just needed to be done correctly.
But him being part of the DMN legacy might have given them a bit of a push forward.
Yeah, I think the morning news was supportive. I mean, they knew that as a city grows, you needed to have this element present to be successful for a lot of reasons. So yes, supportive, yes.
Yeah. Is there a lot of other cities kind of about the same population as Dallas that don't have a sort of agency like this? And if so, are they better or different? Or?
Let's go around the area here first, like Fort Worth. They've kind of a sister city, pretty big. They've struggled mightily with getting public transit up and functioning. So they probably are about 1/4 our size. They're building their first rail, which is a commuter rail that goes from downtown out to the airport. What's a good analogy? If it was a lawnmower, we'd have like a riding lawnmower with pretty good horsepower. They would probably have like a push mower that was like maybe 1 horsepower. So they're trying to catch up, and they're growing, dramatically, but they're behind the curve. Now, part of the reason is we have 1 cent sales tax that allows us to have a more robust staffing and opportunity and resources. They don't, and that's why you see the difference between what we have and what they don't have. DCTA, Denton, it's growing. They're much smaller still. The analogy I always use is if it's a pizza, and you take all the trips that are made on public transportation in the North Texas region, that's all the bus, rail, paratransit, all those things, and that is represented by pizza. The T is one slice, and DCTA is like one pepperoni on that one slice, and we control the rest of those trips. So that's the order of magnitude. So, it's a big area, 700 square miles. Now, you take like Arlington, that's a big city now. It's like 240,000 or something like that. They have no public transportation. They have the largest university up here, 40,000 on campus. And you look around, they have acres of parking because it's a commuter school, and it's not serving them well, and they're very interested in a relationship with us. But their city council is given towards building stadiums and entertainment zones. So therein lies the trade-off of what do they value, where's their priorities.
Council priorities. And would you say that when, in the early days, DART was pretty dangerous to use?
What do you mean by dangerous?
You'd mentioned on the phone something about what made DART controversial in the beginning, and you said there was brown and black issues.
Oh, yeah, the racial issues. Yeah, that's always been present. It's captured by that phrase. Well, you're gonna bring those people. Now, what do you mean by those people? Well, it's black, white, brown. It's the ones who will take your TV and stand at the station waiting for a train with the TV slung over their back. And yeah, we've had that forever. Or we would bring it into their community. But that's part and parcel of what goes with big city. It's really no different now. It's probably truer back in the 70s and 80s where there weren't as many kids with cars. But now there's so many, gangbangers who go around in cars and carjack or whatever.
I think it's probably also just a matter of perception, because
right.
It's kind of more of a class perceived thing here, but if you go to London, every swinging dick's on the train.
Absolutely correct. And that's because the European cities rebuilt post-World War II around rail systems more than they did in the highway system. So you had neighborhoods that were walkable and sustainable and dense, as opposed to the linear sprawl that we're confronted with in the Southwest. And southern sector is a classic example. That in the southern sector in Dallas, there's a lot of housing, but by and large, the black middle class migrated more towards Duncanville, Cedar Hill, DeSoto, Lancaster in the last 30 years. So what you were left, you didn't have the redevelopment in that area because, well, there's a lot of reasons for that, all outside our control. They put commitment to infrastructure, streets, curbs, sidewalks. You didn't have destinations like, there's 2 hospitals, there's probably more clinics now, but there weren't job centers in the area. So what you had is, you had a less dense area, you had housing, but it wasn't connected, and then all of a sudden the jobs kept migrating further and further out. They're downtown, they're STEMs, now the job centers are up at Capel and that whole area north of Las Colinas and down the inland port. And all those are outside our service area. So to get from, down by Bishop College out to a job site in Capel takes 2 hours by bus and trains because you're going 45 miles or something like that. So, yeah, and back to the perception, it's very real. Now, your generation is much more inclined to have greater tolerance and use it for more of a benefit than my generation I've written off. They're not going to change their ways. So, the hope springs with you guys that you kind of get it and improve upon it. And hopefully urban planning and urban design and all things like that go with that of redevelop the inner city. Because there's a lot of need for that. I mean, there's been some real neglect.
For sure.
Yeah, so it's been a pretty interesting world.